Hello, and welcome to me talking about another Grissom lecture for software engineering. If you're new to my channel, hello and welcome. Even though I know no one's going to be new because I know it's you, Bill, who's probably grading this. If it's Dr. Grissom, hello. Anyway, so pretty much what requirement engineering is, or at least what was defined in the lecture, is that it should be very simple. It's pretty much like defining different requirements that we need to meet as software developers. Pretty much like the what should we do, what's the must, what's the won't, what's the could not, what's the could, and then we use user stories and whatnot to get that. There's also like the functionality of it. There's functional, like it defines how the system behaves and like what's all going to work, like buttons and all that kind of fancy schmancy stuff. And then there's the non-functional, which is like security, the performance, and all that kind of stuff that make the app look and feel good, right? So we also have to keep in mind that requirement engineering isn't just software engineering. It also has to deal with the hardware and how we write that together. Like, for example, making something usable for iPhone instead of desktop, like knowing what hardware we are using, what our goal is. So pretty much for our mobile apps, like aiming it towards Android and iPhone. Let's see. So the first thing in the requirement engineering process is the gathering of information. So pretty much what that is we are going to either like interview or survey people that could possibly use the app, and pretty much get like what are the pros, and the pros of doing this is like we could get more data and info really quickly, but the insights might not be very valuable if we do survey. If we do interview, it could be like really ended, but people could kind of get off topic and kind of rant, talk about other things. And then there's also biases. Like if you interview somebody asking them what they should do, they could have their bias. And if it turns out to be competition for them, like you mentioned for the Namibia project, then they might not give you accurate information because they're going to have their own hidden agenda. And then after requirement gathering, we negotiate with the stakeholders. So we like schedule a meeting with them and talk it out, try to figure out what's the important things that they need and what isn't, and then figure out what we would need to do to get an MVP pretty much. From that meeting, we would do modeling, which is like kind of getting up the basic design and everything that what we need, so that way we could give them an MVP, minimum viable project, which is pretty much what the model is, so that way the stakeholders can see this. And then we also analyze this as we go. So, or that's the last step. Last step is like analyzing it. So we have to figure out like what's quality, what is exactly quality, because it's not just the lack of bugs, it's like the application, it's the purpose, all of that good stuff of the software that we will be using. So we shouldn't be just like making it to make it. We should be making it complete and usable and impactful with pertinence, so make sure that we have the requirements that we need. We also need to analyze in the analysis stage, like verification, the risk analysis, like how you mentioned, like do we want to be the ones handling the credit card information, or do we put that off to a third party, which is most likely going to be a third party, because we don't want to mess with people's credit card information, the database stuff, if that gets hacked, because that's potential to be awful. And then there's the minimum viable product. When you talked about that, you talked about like how it shouldn't just be like buying parts to the car to build the car. It should be you're making a skateboard, then you're making a scooter, then you're making a bike, and slowly upgrading it to a nicer car, which I thought that scenario was really good and helped me understand that more, because we do talk about that at my job right now for mobile app development. However, like I haven't actually really understood like the stages of that and whatnot. But yeah, and then as for an application for all of this, I'm going to specifically talk about the Chapel our Chapel application that we made for the web. It's not exactly an app, but it is an application. We talked to Chapel Services. We got their initial analysis, tried to figure out what they want. From there, we had scheduled meetings with them to see what we could and couldn't do. Like they wanted us to like have our face cams on and recognize if they're actually paying attention. We're like, we can't do that. Instead, we ended up figuring out and coming to an agreement to where, all right, we just have to make sure that they're on the page and Chapel's going, and then a few other really kind of petty requirements. But yeah, to figure all that good stuff out. I don't know if my screen went gray there because my phone's at 10%. But yeah, so once we pretty much got the requirements there, we pretty much generated them the minimum viable product, which worked for the most part. We had it set up, we set meetings up, they told us to fix some things, we fixed those things, and then we put it out for production, which was the MVP. Of course, we had some bugs that we didn't prepare for because we didn't have the load of users that we needed to test and all that stuff. But when we found those bugs, we immediately made our version 2.0, 3.0, and all that good stuff, and making Chapel pretty good for the most part now. So that's just an example of an application of that. I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk. Goodbye.